All right, welcome. Good morning. Uh, if there were some technical difficulties in getting the word out, some of the Zoom communications this morning that I had on my end, but we are blessed to be recording this. So I want to thank CRC, and I want to thank Rabbi Reese Shlita for helping us put this important opportunity together. On behalf of the CRC and the Shul, I just wanted to introduce with one thought, and that is that sometimes you have someone who is incredibly influential in your opportunity to thank them, acknowledge them, because their influence is so overarching. It's so powerful in your life that you don't see the day to day. And I spent, I think, 12 years on the MTA YU campus, University campus, and those years were incredibly special, formative for me and for so many of my chaverim, and for so many of the rabbis helped shape the Jewish community in Chicago. And a lot of that is due to the vision and the wisdom and the teaching and the hashkafa of Rabbi Dr. Norman Lamb Zatzal. And on the occasion of the Shloshim, we wanted to have an opportunity, someone who knew him, someone who was much closer, and someone who has perhaps some incredible insights to share about Rabbi Lamb's legacy. And who better than our Av based in Rabbi Yonah Reese. So b'chavod, Rabbi Reese, and thank you for sharing with us this morning a few words.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Gelman. I want to make sure that I can be heard, and that also my image is clear. Are you able to see and hear me?
We can hear you right now. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Very good. So I appreciate, first of all, Rabbi Gelman's efforts and Rabbi Mostavsky's efforts at putting this program together. It's difficult to take time sometimes on a Sunday morning, but it's certainly appropriate to pay tribute to this extraordinary figure. It's really a tremendous privilege for me, as well as an awesome responsibility to say a few words of hesped and tribute in honor of Rabbi Nachum Norman Lamb, Nachum ben Shmuel, Zecher Tzadik Levacha, who was our revered leader, teacher, and mentor. Rabbi Lamb was, of course, a towering figure in the Orthodox Jewish community, as well as the entire Jewish world, best known as the long-serving president of Yeshiva University, and afterwards its chancellor, and also its Rosh HaYeshiva. He was also the author of numerous treatises on Jewish philosophy, including Torah Lishma, Torah Umada, the religious thought of Hasidism, Faith and Doubt, the Royal Reach, 70 Faces, and the Shema, Spirituality and Law in Judaism, as well as the author of Hedge of Roses, written earlier in his career, which was a beautiful rendition of the laws of Jewish family purity when not as many people were keeping it, and they needed to be inspired regarding how relevant and beautiful it still is. Also, he was the author of the recently published collection of his timely and timeless drashos, as well as numerous other publications in both the Hebrew and English language. Rabbi Lamb was almost indescribable. He was a poet and a philosopher, a chemist and a humorist, a scholar and a fundraiser, a visionary and a pragmatist, a communal leader and a consummate family man devoted to his wonderful late wife, Mindela, who just predeceased him by a month or so. And also, of course, a wonderful father to his children and grandfather to his grandchildren. He was an orator with a golden tongue. He was a gifted writer with a prolific pen. He was, for the YU community, pretty much a veritable Nachum Ish Gamzu. Whatever he was good at, you could also say Gamzu. He was good at the next thing as well. And like Nachum Ish Gamzu, he found good in everything. He was able to say Gamzu L'Tova regarding all the wonders and experiences that he observed in God's universe. For most of his career, I beheld him, like most students, from afar. With an occasional conversation of Rabbi Lamb, when I served later on as director of the Beth Din of America. But then I had one window of 5 years from the years 2008 to 2013, during which time I merited to work alongside him as the dean of Yeshivat Rabbeinu Yitzchak Elchanan, while he was serving as chancellor and Rosh Yeshiva during the presidency, of course, of Richard M. Joel, and to interact with Rabbi Lamb regularly at Rosh Yeshiva meetings, board meetings, and many private conversations during which he discussed with me the welfare of the students in the yeshiva and many other matters. I remember once at a Rosh Yeshiva meeting, after saying some nice words about Rabbi Lamb, he turned to me and said, "Rabbi Reese, you can say a hesped at my levaya." I never really thought about this statement until Rabbi Gelman asked me if I would say a few words in his memory, and suddenly I realized that this may have been a message min hashamayim to make good on this rather extraordinary request or exhortation, which I probably never took seriously enough. Rabbi Lamb was one of those people whom we just took for granted. His passing away epitomizes the truth of the midrashic dictum, Yetzias HaTzadik min hamakom oseh roshim, that the departure of the righteous from a place makes an imprint. When a person such as Rabbi Lamb is so essential to your Weltanschauung, you don't notice their presence in your life because it is like the sun shining every morning and the moon reflecting its light every evening. It was just a reassuring reality, the perfect spokesperson for YU, for Torah Mada, for what my Rebbe, Rav Shechter Shlita, sometimes describes as Torah and normalcy. But the sudden departure of Rabbi Lamb from our world hit us like a ton of bricks. Suddenly we appreciated how extraordinary he really was and how deeply touched we were through his brilliance, through his communal leadership, and most of all, through his vision for contemporary orthodoxy, whether you call it modern orthodoxy or centrist orthodoxy, as he eventually became more fond of describing it. Many Maspidim have said words of great insight and appreciation for Rabbi Lamb's unmatchable personality, capturing his multi-dimensional talents. I want to focus during my presentation this morning on three aspects of Rabbi Lamb in terms of what he meant to me personally, because I imagine that this is what he really wanted me to do. First of all, he was a first-rate, bona fide, world-class Talmid Chacham. It is easy for us not to focus upon this because of his heavy involvement in fundraising as the president of YU, or even because we tend to highlight more his prodigious talents as an unrepentant darshan, somebody renowned for his brilliant oratorial skills, both as president of YU and when he was rabbi of the Jewish Center in Manhattan, somebody who had a penchant for being able to pull out the right medrash or rabbinic aphorism at the right time with a quick wit and articulate alliteration to match it. And yet, unbeknownst or unappreciated by many, even his own yeshiva, who were not privileged to hear shiurim from him on a regular basis, he was truly a Yodea Sefer par excellence, who is proficient in all of the Havayos Abaye v'Rava. One of his children mentioned that despite all of his other very popular books, Rabbi Lamb's own feeling was that his collection of Chidushei Torah that he published in the Sefer Halachos v'Halichos would most likely be his entry ticket into the gates of heaven. Additionally, you do a search for Rabbi Lamb on the Bar Ilan CD-ROM, which I just did recently, you will find a series of brilliant Torah articles that he authored for the prestigious Torah journal, Torah Sheba'al Peh, written in scholarly and elegant Hebrew and probably delivered in person at the annual Torah Sheba'al Peh conferences in Israel with rhetorical panache, and in certain cases reflecting shiurim that had also been delivered at YU by him during his very well-attended Yortzeit shiurim in memory of his presidential predecessors of Yitzchok Elchanan Spector and Rabbi Shmuel Belkin. But these published shiurim, in my mind, are not even the most impressive evidence of his legacy as a Talmid Chacham. What I found, you should mention also, I think they were in memory of President Bernard Revel. What I found particularly gripping are the citations of him by his maternal grandfather, Rabbi Yeshua ben Nachum Bammel, in the Sfarim Emek Halacha, in which Rabbi Lamb is repeatedly cited and described by his grandfather as Nechdi Abachor Hecharif Shanun, my sharp and witty young grandson. Among the numerous insights cited by Rabbi Bammel from his sharp and witty grandson are an observation from his grandson from a recently published version of the Meiri to Maseches Moed Katan, that the Kohanim who had served in the first temple in the first Beis HaMikdash and then returned 70 years later at a very old age to do service in the second temple needed to bring a new Minchas Chinuch, a new inaugurative meal offering, which thus substantiated the previously unquoted view of the Malbim, who had stated this on his own, as well as a beautiful proof cited by his grandfather, provided by the young Nachum Lamb to support his grandfather's thesis that the principle of Esei Dochet Lo Saseh, that a positive commandment overrides a negative commandment, doesn't apply when the essay, the positive commandment, is performed without kavanas mitzvah, without requisite intent, based upon, said the young Nachum Lamb, the Ramban's explanation in the Torah that the reason Esei Dochet Lo Saseh is because each essay, each positive commandment is based on avoda me'ava, on service of a Kadosh Baruch Hu from love. And each lo saseh, each negative commandment, represents avoda me'ira, service of Hashem from fear. So that ava is greater than yira, that love of Hashem is greater than fear of Hashem, and that is why a positive commandment overrides a negative commandment, says the Ramban. But of course, pointed out the young Nachum Lamb, that if the mitzvah's essay, if the positive commandment is done without kavanah, without the requisite intent, as his grandfather discussed, then the ava, the love, would be lacking. So of course, in such a case, the essay, the positive commandment, would no longer supersede the lo saseh, the negative commandment. I would only note that Rabbi Bammel's last volume of Emek Halacha, which contains all of these insights, and which came out towards the end of his life, was published in 1945, when Rabbi Lamb did not yet have the title of Rabbi Lamb or Dr. Lamb, and was merely 17 or 18 years old. His Talmudic erudition was the legacy of a prolific, passionate, and purebred Talmid Chacham. When we celebrate Rabbi Lamb's legacy, this should be first and foremost, because being a Talmid Chacham was indeed first and foremost in his life before he was anything else. He often spoke about how when there is a perceived conflict between Torah and the secular world, Torah always wins out, and he genuinely meant it. Torah and Halacha were supreme and inviolate in his mind and in his heart. The second point that I want to bring out is that for many of us who have struggled with the dialectical tensions of centrist orthodoxy, Rabbi Lamb was not only the visionary leader of this movement who led Yeshiva University and founded the Tradition Journal and the Orthodox Forum think tank, but was also a kindred spirit who understood all of the challenges, antinomies, and loneliness of trying to carve out a life of meaning in accordance with a golden mean that sometimes felt more like a treacherous labyrinth, a yellow wood with two paths that diverged from it, with a mandate to somehow take them both. If as a young freshman at Yeshiva, I had been afforded a chance to sit down with President Lamb and to share with him at that time my own struggles, frustrations, and aspirations in trying to excel in Torah while at the same time majoring in philosophy and trying to successfully pursue a professional degree, undoubtedly I would have returned to my colleagues with the amazing revelation, to paraphrase the famous cartoonist Walt Kelly, that I have met the president and he is us. Rabbi Lamb struggled with all the same issues, but how to balance and define Torah and Madda, how to remain faithful to tradition, engaged in a changing world, how to be considerate of social causes while unflinching about Torah principles, how to ensure the primacy of Torah living and Torah learning while being part of university life, professional life, and political and cultural life. It was only after recently rereading his book, Torah U'Madda, which I had the privilege of reviewing for the Tradition Journal that he founded, that I came to appreciate how, although he sat down and tried to write answers to some of these conundrums, he really found many of these questions and attempted answers every bit as vexing and troublesome as both his constituents and his detractors. What came across most refreshingly in my reread of his book was his incredible humility, his candid admission that he was not entirely sure of his conclusions or arguments and that he welcomed other opinions, provided that they were rendered like his opinions always were, with a spirit of respect and tolerance. And he did not hesitate to draw upon Hasidism, which seemed to be from a different universe, from our Litvisha-based yeshiva, to provide his ultimate justification and explication of the yeshiva's philosophy of Torah Umada as stemming from finding a basis to celebrate Hashem in all aspects of creation, what he referred to as Avoda Begashmius, borrowing from Hasidism. The only intolerance that Rabbi Lamb seemed to harbor, as he expressed during his address at my Chag HaSmicha graduation, was towards intolerance itself. And even that reservation, I suspect, was born from years of suffering, the slings and arrows of intolerance from others whom he had personally treated with honor and respect. I think that he simply concluded that intolerance was, from an intellectual perspective, the most dangerous and unforgivable vice. But deep down, I think that he was tolerant of intolerance as well. He just wanted to ensure that the smicha students whom he was ordaining would not be intolerant themselves. But you see, Rabbi Lamb felt a measure of responsibility for the progress and development of each smicha student. I will relate to you something not well known in that regard. At least during my first few years as dean of the yeshiva, even though Rabbi Lamb was not very strong at that time, he would make a special point of meeting with every single smicha student before signing their smicha. Not only would he take great pains to meet with them, either in his office or later when he was more frail, sometimes in his home, but he would invariably write me a note afterwards summarizing his impressions of every single student. The notes were filled with personal insights that he had gleaned with respect to each student and appreciation of that student's strengths and talents. It was gratifying for me as the menahel of the smicha program to know that Rabbi Lamb was paying attention to the caliber of our smicha graduates, which made my job easier. And I had this benefit until the very last day of my tenure in that position. On June 30th, 2013, I stepped down as dean to assume my new role as Rosh Yeshiva and faculty member. And on July 1st, the very next day, Rabbi Lamb stepped down as chancellor and Rosh Yeshiva. I very much appreciate, in addition to everything else that Rabbi Lamb did for Klal Yisrael, that he waited for me personally. The third point that I wanted to mention is that for me at least, the private persona of Rabbi Lamb was quite different from the public persona. There are some speakers who are warm and personable when they speak in public, but aloof and socially dysfunctional in private. Rabbi Lamb was the opposite. He was regal and dignified to the point of intimidation whenever he spoke in public, and yet was down to earth and incredibly approachable in private. When I served as dean at yeshiva, I met with Rabbi Lamb in his office on a monthly or bi-monthly basis, and each time it was like visiting a kindly grandfather who was full of advice, wisdom, gentle humor, and unmistakable warmth. The one memory that really stands out is that once I mentioned during our monthly meeting around Hanukkah time that I was preparing to give a shiur to some students later that day. And Rabbi Lamb immediately pounced upon this and said, "When and where is it going to be? I want to be there." And I can't really say this was a shiur that I felt was going to be my proudest performance per se, or that I even knew how many Talmidim would show up since it was in a small venue and hadn't been much publicized, but I couldn't talk him out of it. What happens that it wasn't so well attended, but Rabbi Lamb sat there the entire time hanging on my every word. My topic, as I recall, was the machlokas between the Rambam and the Baal Halachos Gedolos about whether mitzvahs d'Rabbanan were to be counted in the tabulation of 613 mitzvahs, and how it related to our appreciation of the mitzvah of observing Hanukkah. What I remember most is how afterwards Rabbi Lamb came to my office to tell me how wonderful he thought the shiur was and how much he thoroughly enjoyed it. And it just gave me tremendous chizuk as a new member of the yeshiva administration who was just getting into the hang of giving shiurim at the yeshiva, I think that his kind and supportive comment was the turning point for me personally. And after that time, I enjoyed not only better attendance, but a better reception in general of my shiurim. He gave me on that day a dose of self-confidence that I will never forget, and he continuously reinforced that sense of self-esteem throughout all of our subsequent interactions, even after I left the position of dean and moved to Chicago, becoming Ab Bezdin of the CRC and a traveling Rosh Yeshiva. I was not particularly surprised to discover afterwards that Rabbi Lamb had this type of relationship and influence with many others as well. He was not only a leader, but through his caring and nurturing manner, a mentor and framer of many future leaders. And this is a vital part of his continuing and unfolding legacy. In the end, it turns out that the public persona and the private persona were not really in conflict. Over time, I came to appreciate that although his speeches carried with them an authoritative tone, he was far from authoritarian. His oratory was ornate, but never ornery. While he presented his ideas passionately and persuasively, he was very open to the reality that there were other legitimate views. He could respect and tolerate any disagreement. He also demonstrated a readiness to acknowledge and apologize for his own mistakes. Perhaps one of his greatest legacies was to teach us that to stand proudly as a Jew is not a contradiction to v'nachnu ma, to the humility that is required of every Jew. We can and should be proud in our efforts to promote the glory of Hashem through Torah learning and profound scholarship, while at the same time submissive to the will of Hashem and eternally respectful to all of those created in his image. I believe that these three aspects of Rabbi Lamb, the Talmid Chacham, the kindred spirit who experienced and exemplified for all of us how to navigate and live the complex existence of centrist orthodoxy, and finally the warm and gentle grandfatherly figure are the Chut HaMishulash that are included in the three things that hold up the world, according to the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. Rabbi Lamb, above all else, embodied Torah. He was a quintessential Torah scholar and champion of Torah values, principles, and messages. Al Havoda, he was a man of service, not only in the sense of Avoda Shebalev Zutfila, which he wrote so eloquently about in his deep and probing book regarding the prayer of Shema Yisrael and what it truly means, but in his constant striving to create the right sense of synthesis or symbiosis between the Torah learning and Avoda Begashmius, finding and serving Hashem through every aspect of the world, its treasure troves of scientific and academic knowledge, and through the multiplicity of life's experiences. And finally, Al Gemilus Chasadim. He always took time to mentor, nurture, and attend to the needs of others, whether the members of his family or of his congregation in the Jewish Center, which he never abandoned, or of other nascent Jewish leaders or aspiring Jewish figures, to give them a boost or to imply kindly advice from a place of genuine caring and concern. His life and his work are a reminder to us of what we should all aspire to be as holistic, true Jews, to build the world by being fully engaged in it through the prism of Torah and Avodas Hashem. Yehi Zichro Baruch.
Thank you, Rabbi Reese, for sharing those wonderful words. We'll be sure to share them beyond, of course, this live call. And may Rabbi Lamb's memory be blessed, as you articulated. And I wish everyone to have a wonderful day and look forward to joining you in the community for future learning opportunities in this new exciting Zoom era. Kol hakavod, thank you so much for making the time.